interview in the early 2000s when the Netherlands stopped the mandatory time in the army, and he changed his working from getting people to avoid that kind of work to getting people to avoid paying taxes. It was a 1-hour interview last week, so let's see how long we go for today. Freedom Radio says the shopping mall looks more and more like Venezuela. Everybody was standing in line. Well, that's the funny thing. We don't have that here. So if you go into the supermarket, for example, it's completely crowded. There is not a real line. Only Lidl keeps a line, I believe. But most other shops, they don't care, man. In my opinion, all these rules are completely ridiculous. They are not really meant for our healthcare, but they are meant so we are being prepared for a global currency reset. I want to let everybody know that a highlight video of this interview will be put on my YouTube channel. By the way, I just uploaded a YouTube channel. Let's have a look at my video of yesterday. Let me pause the music.
Muss ich sprechen?
Ja, wann du willst.
Die Natur muss sprechen, nicht die.
Nu langsam.
This is me fishing yesterday.
Achtung.
It's so beautiful here, guys.
80 Stunden.
8 hours,
niet
I
zoveel.
say. I have Toine here on my Skype. Let's see if it works.
Aber das ist jetzt die zweite Mal.
Hm?
Zweite Mal.
He
Vielleicht
answered
noch
me in
10
WhatsApp. Let's see. I'm going to call you. I will call you now, Toine. So, beautiful weather here. Unfortunately, I cannot enjoy it. Let's see what Toine Manders has to say about it. I'm gonna call him right now. And let's see if he answers.
De persoon die u probeert te bereiken is momenteel niet beschikbaar.
Oh,
U kunt een bericht inspreken na de pieptoon.
that was the voicemail. Let me try again. He's calling me now, also good. Hello, Toine.
Hello.
Give me a second so I can set up all the stuff that I need to set up. I would love to get some feedback from the people to hear if they hear Toine.
All right.
I got you on the screen, so that's one step more than last week. Could you speak a little bit with us, Toine?
Yes, of course. Can you hear me?
I would love to. I can hear you. I hope that other people can hear you. It should be, because I see your volume bar moving, but I would love to hear from some people if they hear Toine. Can you speak again, Toine?
Yes, of course. What would you like me to talk about?
Well, good question. I think that was enough. I see Frommel responding that he can hear us. So I'm going to record this just as a backup. Let me record it, Toine. Give me a second here. How do you do that again? You don't see me, I think. That's because of the settings with the stream, so I hope that's okay with you. Let me start the recording here. And then Toine, oh, yes, okay, I got you. Toine, we ended last week somewhere in the early 2000s, where the Dutch government ended the mandatory duty of youngsters in the army, and you changed your business model to helping those people to avoid taxes or optimize their taxes. And well, let's continue that chat. One side note is that I run a raffle in the stream every 20 minutes. So once every 20 minutes, I will take a short break. We're going to run the raffle wheel, and the people in the stream that can also, by the way, ask questions will win a small crypto prize. But yeah, I would love to hear more from you. And in general, we had a very successful week. I can tell you here, Toine, that we had a huge donation 1 week ago, one day after you joined us. And we are now 1 follower away from 100. So let's see if we can get that 1 extra follower here and then celebrate it together.
Okay. Let's see. I think we were in the year 2008. I was telling you the very short version of the story of my life. And
which can, by the way, be longer. I was in the last week, I thought that we were just going to have 1 interview, and now I really like that you are a returning guest. So take your time, Toine. I like to hear your stories. I have introduced you to all the people watching now as my one of my heroes. So the floor is yours, and I try to give you some feedback I get from the people in the channel, and if they have questions, I'm gonna ask their questions to you, and let's see how it goes.
Yeah. Well, I think I told you that in the year 2008, I organized a campaign where ads of the firm HSC were aired on national radio.
And they were saying taxation is theft.
That's right. That was the main slogan of this campaign. It was the taxation is theft campaign.
Yeah.
And well, I had the, how shall I put this, questionable pleasure of having pissed off some people with this campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And it started with a complaint that someone made against this campaign, particularly against the slogan "Taxation is theft." In the Netherlands, there is an organization called Reclamecodecommissie. So that, if you translate it, it's like the Commercial Code Committee or Commercial Code Commission. And they claim that what they're all about is self-regulation. What they claim is that businesses, organizations that advertise or that allow others to advertise through their medium, these organizations have voluntarily formed an association.
Yes.
Because they believe it's important that advertisers stick to certain norms.
It's kind of blackmail on your morality.
And so it sounds very good, sounds very nice. It sounds like it's a voluntary form of self-regulation. But unfortunately, as often happens, the government takes over at some point. The government incorporates it into their own system so that it loses its voluntary character. Now, in this particular case, I don't know if there was a previous period where it really was voluntarily, but it certainly is not anymore. It hasn't been in a long time. Because if you want to become a broadcaster in the Netherlands through the airwaves or through cable, then you need a license from the government. And one of the requirements of getting such a license and keeping such a license is to become a member of this Commercial Code Commission.
Mm-hmm.
And that, of course, takes away the voluntary character. Now,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
the
I get it.
point that was made was that the slogan, taxation theft, was indecent. It was in violation of the norm of common decency. That was the complaint. And I had a hard time taking it seriously, so I didn't hire a lawyer or take any particular interest in pursuing this. So one of my employees took it upon himself to write back to this committee.
To show
And
your decency in a way, because hey, you can just throw that letter in the garbage bin if it would be voluntary, right?
well, that's what you'd think, yes. Now, what happened is that the committee rendered a verdict, and their verdict was that indeed the slogan was in violation of common decency. And they made a so-called recommendation to stop to the media to stop advertising, to stop the commercial, to no longer broadcast it. And it sounds nice, a recommendation, but as I explained, the government has basically taken over by making it mandatory for any broadcaster to get a government license, and making that license dependent on being a member of this organization, this committee, and to follow their recommendations, which means they're no longer recommendations. It means it's now become censorship. So it's censorship disguised as a recommendation. It's called self-regulation, but it's not. It is government regulation. And it's called voluntary, but it's not. It's coerced. So it reminded me of 1984, where you have these slogans like freedom is slavery, or slavery is freedom, and war is
yes.
Well, this organization has a procedure through which you can appeal their decision.
All right.
And but the funny thing is that the people who are on the appeal committee are appointed by the exact same people who appointed the members of the Commercial Code Committee. So yes, they have an appeal procedure, but the people who judge you in the appeals procedure are no different.
But are they exactly the same, or are they just?
No, they're different people,
No,
but
they
they're
are different
by
people.
the same people.
Yeah. Okay. I thought maybe that they were both the same. That would be really out of line. But okay, I get it.
So when I found out that this is no joke, that this is real censorship, and that this would mean the end of the campaign, because no media would ever dare go against the recommendation of this committee, because they could lose their license. That's when I decided to show up at the hearing of this appeals committee, and I tried to explain to them that, in my view, there's nothing indecent about the slogan, because it's true.
You explain yourself quite well. I've shown that video a couple of times now, so I will not do it again. I will now write the link.
There's no video of this. I'm sorry, there is no video of this particular hearing.
No, I understand, but there are other instances where you explain how taxation is theft.
That's right. Yes.
And you do that quite well. I mean, people get it if you say it.
Thank you.
I think your reasoning makes sense. Let's put it like that.
Thanks. Yeah. So the way I explain it to them is that, in my view, it is true, and you should be allowed to speak the truth. I'm in favor of truth in advertising, and it's true. And the reason it is true is because there is a higher form of law than legislation, which is natural law. And this is a principle that was widely accepted at the time of the Nuremberg trial. Because a lot of German war criminals that were tried at the Nuremberg trials claimed that they did nothing illegal because everything they did had first been legalized by the Nazi government.
Yeah.
And the vision of the judges at the Nuremberg trial was that just because the Nazi government first legalized what they were about to do doesn't mean it's no longer a crime. And because there's such a thing as natural law.
In Wonderland, we also ran under natural law.
Yes, and so I try to explain it to them in this way, that that under natural law, there is a definition of theft, which is basically to take away somebody else's property without his consent, without any justification. And the only justification there can be is, well, the person committed a crime, caused damages, committed a tort, damages,
broke his contract.
That's one justification of taking away someone's property, because he owes damages.
Yes.
Another justification is if you voluntarily enter into an agreement, into a contract, and you receive a good or service, and in return you must pay. And if you then refuse to pay, then you owe payment because you voluntarily agreed to pay.
Exactly, I get that too.
So there are justifications for making someone give up his property against his will, but none of these justifications apply in the case of taxation, because the taxpayer, he hasn't committed a tort, he hasn't committed a crime, he doesn't owe damages, he never voluntarily agreed to pay taxes. That's a one-sided transaction that's imposed by the government. There's no agreement prior to the transaction, and therefore taxation is theft. So I explained it to them in this way, and then they rendered their decision, and their decision was that they decided that the original committee's decision that the slogan was in violation of the standard of common decency was incorrect.
Wow, I don't think that happens often.
Well, wait for the second part of the decision. The second part.
Okay, sorry, I was too quick again.
They also made the same recommendation to their members to not broadcast this commercial on a different ground, namely the ground that it is not true.
Wow.
Taxation is theft, it's not true.
Wow.
And you're only allowed to say things in a commercial that are true.
Amazing. Let's have a cliffhanger here, Toine. Let's have a cliffhanger, because I have some announcement to make. About 10 minutes ago, we had a new follower, Matt1980. This is follower number 100. So, Toine, thank you. You got it done, my friend. I'm going to now run a raffle. I'm not sure if you can see it, Toine, but I spin a wheel. Somebody's going to win a crypto prize, and today, or at least this round, we're gonna double this prize because we reached 100 followers. So congratulations, everybody, we made it. Let's see, 8 participants in this round. Good luck to all of you. Orion, it's you this time. Double the prize. Let's see what you won, Orion. I'm gonna spin the wheel. Spin your wheel. 25,000 world tokens with a multiplier of 1, and a double up, so that makes 50,000 world tokens. A double up because we have reached 100 followers. Amazing milestone. I'm gonna start a new raffle. It's counting down 20 minutes from now. Starting right now, exclamation mark raffle to participate once again. And then we're gonna continue with Toine. I have a lot of comments of people telling you that you explain yourself so good, and but no real questions yet, Toine. So we're just gonna let you keep on talking. You were saying that you won in a way in the fact that the first recommendation was turned down, but then there was a new recommendation saying you were lying. So and that a commercial is not allowed to share lies. Amazing. Tell me more.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is because it's not formally a government organization, even though in reality it is. It's very hard to fight it in court because it's assumed to be just a voluntary association that may make up their own rules, and they're allowed to do this. So it was. I looked into hiring a lawyer to fight this in court, and I was told it's most probably going to be a waste of money to try and fight this in court because it's not considered government censorship, even though it is.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, I think I may have told you in our previous broadcast that the Dutch Constitution has a clause on freedom of speech. And what it says is everybody has freedom of speech, except where the law says otherwise.
Yeah. You mentioned that. You mentioned, but you didn't go into it more.
Yeah, that's Article 1. Article 2 is there is no freedom of speech in terms of commercial speech. Commercial advertising is not protected by the freedom of speech clause. So that made it very hard to fight this in court as well. So I was told by the lawyer, just live with it, deal with it. It's they're not going to broadcast it anymore.
Of course, also because even if the judge would give you a green light, they would most likely just have another issue with it, and then you're still back at square one, right? You fight them on the next point, and they are gonna find something new. And because it's such a kind of lockdown situation, the media doesn't have the freedom to run every commercial they want because they lose their license. So whenever you solve this small issue, then they're gonna find a next new small issue, and if they don't want your commercial out there, they're gonna censor you.
Oh yes, well the government has its ways to shut people up. I'll get to that later, but
All right.
this particular lawyer's argument was not that that there was no point in pursuing the case in court because even if I won, then the Commercial Code Committee would just find some other ground to again make the same recommendation. That was not his point. His point was that it was extremely unlikely that I would win this case in court. So that was a minor setback. In the year 2000, the same organization that is entrusted with enforcing the anti-money laundering laws that had been harassing me in the year 2005 came with a basically tried it again.
They sent you another inquiry. Are we talking about this organization that asked you whether you were dealing in trust work, trust-related work?
That would be the Dutch Central Bank.
Okay, okay.
They are in charge of enforcing the law regulating trust companies. This is another organization. They're called Bureau of Financial Oversight.
Okay.
And their job is to, well, one of their jobs is to enforce the anti-money laundering laws. Um, and So that was another attempt to make my life difficult or make HEC's life difficult, but that also failed. They backed off after a couple of months. So, but this is not something that stands by itself. I mean, it's an ongoing thing. These legal battles with the government. I also was in a conflict with or not me personally, but the HSC was in a conflict with the tax authorities, and the conflict had gone to court, but the taxman decided not to wait for the court's verdict, and instead decided to have HSC declared bankrupt. Or better put, to have one of HEC Group's companies declared bankrupt, which they could do within the law. I mean, it's sort of strange, you might say. You might say it makes more sense to wait for the court's verdict, and if you win, then ask for bankruptcy. But they didn't. And by itself, it was a minor setback because it was just one of our companies.
Mm-hmm.
It was a company that had no clients and had very, very few assets. So it was actually fairly easy to continue business.
Yeah.
And the clients were not hurt by this incident because the company that went bankrupt had no clients. But what happened is that a receiver was appointed, sometimes also referred to as a trustee in bankruptcy.
Yeah.
And he was a baron, member of the aristocracy.
Okay.
Um,
They are notorious for taking all the money, even if when there is none.
Well, I mean, there was a time when the king sort of delegated the right to tax to the aristocracy, who then delegated the right to tax to the tax collectors, and pocketed a certain percentage of the revenue, and so you could argue that that in the days of feudalism, the aristocracy made their fortune not through production and trade and productivity and creativity, but instead the way they made their fortune is simply by being in cahoots with the king and sharing part of the loot of taxation. Also by conquering land. So typically, what would happen is that the king would conquer land, and the men who fought for him were rewarded by giving them a part of the conquered land.
Yeah.
That's how the aristocracy became landowners, not because they worked the land and acquired the land through homesteading, but by conquering the land on behalf of the king and then being rewarded by the king with a part of the loot of the conquered land.
Yeah.
So you might say it's a bit of a tradition among these people to not live through productive labor, but to live through extortion.
Yeah.
Anyway, he seemed to be on a crusade. I'm not sure what his motivation was. Part of it was probably financial. I'll get to that later, but he did everything he could to ruin my reputation. Gave interviews to the press. uh, accusing me of fraud. He
Yeah, they try to break your trustworthiness, kind
yeah.
of, right, and
Oh,
make your clients doubt you.
I'll start off with a story of uh, that may serve to explain how the perverse incentive structure has been created for Dutch receivers.
Right.
Now, in the Netherlands, in the 90s, it was this. It was there was an organization of receivers. They don't call themselves a lobby, but that is obviously part of what they did is lobby the government.
Mm-hmm.
And these receivers said, well, we have a major problem in society, which is that a lot of people commit bankruptcy fraud. So what these people do is they form a company, order goods, don't pay for the goods, sell the goods, um,
And then go
strip,
bankrupt.
strip the company of its money and assets,
Yeah.
let it go bankrupt, where it's completely empty, it's completely stripped of assets. The court appoints a receiver who must be paid from the bankrupt company's assets, which are zero.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, this receiver will do nothing because he knows he won't be paid, so he does almost nothing. And he doesn't even bother investigating whether there was bankruptcy fraud. And he doesn't bother filing a report with the police or with the prosecutors. That there's a suspicion of bankruptcy fraud. He does none of these things because he doesn't get paid for it. And that is true. That is a problem. Now, of course, the police are already paid to investigate these matters and prosecute them. But they don't bother with that because, well, they have no incentive to go after real criminals.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, if the police do their job very poorly and crime goes up, they get more money and more powers.
Yeah. In a way, yeah, it's true.
So, and they have no competition. They cannot lose their customers to the competition because there is no competition. So they do a lousy job. So the police wasn't doing anything about it. The receivers weren't doing anything, but nobody was doing anything about it. So they assumed that about 98% of the people committing bankruptcy were getting away with it, which may have been very true. To me, that just shows how incompetent government is and how wasteful it is and how bad it is that they monopolize valuable services. But that's not the conclusion that this organization of receivers drew. They lobbied the government because they found a solution. And the solution that they came up with is the following solution. They said, let's have the government guarantee the receiver's salary subject to certain conditions. Now, typically a receiver in the Netherlands is an attorney at law, specialized in bankruptcy law or insolvency law. And typically his hourly rate, it will be somewhere between, I don't know, 180 to 300 euros an hour, something around somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
And that is, and the salary that a receiver is paid is typically somewhere around that neighborhood, usually somewhere between 150 and 250 or 280 euros an hour, depending on the receiver's experience and how difficult the case is.
Mm-hmm.
And this, like I said before, normally it's paid out of the bankrupt company's assets. Now, if a bankrupt company has a lot of assets, this can be extremely lucrative. To give you an example, in 2008, 2009, in that financial crisis, a Dutch bank went bankrupt called DSB.
Mm-hmm.
All the banks were bailed out except for this one because he was not well connected. The politicians didn't like him.
Yeah.
The bank.
Exclamation mark pizza in the chat for people that want to know more about it.
So they let this is the one bank that wasn't bailed out, and it went bankrupt. And but a lot of people owed this bank money. They had to pay back their loans to this bank. They had to pay interest to this bank.
Yeah, yeah.
So a lot of money is coming into this bankrupt bank. And the court appointed 2 receivers. And this happened like 2009, so over 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And every couple of years, there is an article in the newspaper where you can read how much the bill is that the receivers have racked up. And I forgot the exact number, but it's dozens of millions of euros. I think the last one I read was something like 229 million euros.
Yeah.
Was what they had charged to the bankrupt bank.
In the crypto world, we have a case with Mt. Gox. I don't know if you ever heard of that Japanese Bitcoin exchange. They went bankrupt. Last year there was an article that they actually didn't even need to go bankrupt. It was just declared bankrupt because, well, there's a lot more story behind it. The CEO, Mark Capellis, is actually being brought forward by some conspiracy theories as one of the early owners of the Silk Road. That's another completely different story, though.
Okay.
Please continue.
So it can be extremely lucrative to be a receiver, and as a result, the courts in the Netherlands have a system where the law firms are basically given a turn. So when they decide which lawyer to appoint as a receiver, they see that they have this list of law firms, and
they just start on the top and they cross them down and then they start on the top again.
Yes. So when all this happened, I had a meeting with a lawyer specialized in bankruptcy law,
mm-hmm.
and he invited me to his office, but it was a different office than the one I'd found the one I'd found on his website, or he was recommended, and he explained to me that the reason that the law firm had 2 offices is because the other office was in a different district for a different bankruptcy court. And he said, by having 2 offices, one in each district, we will also be considered for bankruptcies in the other district. So we get twice as many bankruptcies handed to us, which is very lucrative. That's why we do this. It also leads to a system where these receivers try to be very cozy with the judge that has to oversee them, because these receivers have a huge amount of power. They are accountable to no one except this particular judge.
Mm-hmm.
But this judge has to oversee not just one receiver, but a huge amount of them. So he doesn't really have time to do his job well because there's so many of them. So these judges really like receivers that don't give them a lot of work, a lot of trouble, but just ask them to sign at the dotted line.
Yeah.
And obviously, and these judges decide whether to give the go-ahead for any requests that they have. And it's very common for judges to go along with just about any recommendation a receiver makes.
As long as their reputation stays intact, of course. We have never had problems with this receiver, so there will not be any in the future.
And also, I mean, the court is supposed to make sure that these lawyers don't overcharge, that the lawyers that act as receivers don't overcharge.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, the judge who decides on whether the payment is reasonable, it's not money out of his pocket. He won't eat one sandwich less, as we say in the Netherlands, if a receiver overcharges, because it's no shirt of his back. So it's it's a system that has a lot of perverse incentives. So typically, 95% of Dutch bankruptcies, when they are closed, when their cases are closed, the only creditor who gets paid is the receiver himself. because he gets paid first. He gets paid before the bank, even before the tax authorities, and certainly in favor of all the other creditors. He gets paid first. So what most receivers do is they just keep on prolonging their activities. They keep writing more and more hours and billing more and more hours until finally all the assets in the bankrupt company are gone. And then they say, well, my job is done here.
Yeah.
We can close the case now.
That's a well-known story. I have heard it. I've heard it too.
Yeah. Now, but of course, when people commit bankruptcy fraud, they make sure that there are no assets left in the company. They strip all the assets out. So then the receivers have no financial incentive to do anything. So they do nothing. So nothing happens. So getting back to the lobby organization, which does not call itself a lobby organization, that lobbied the government for a solution. Their solution was, let's have the government guarantee the receiver's salary, subject to a few conditions. Now, condition number one is that the receiver must suspect there may be bankruptcy fraud. That's a condition that my receiver in the firm that went bankrupt, that I was the director of, that this receiver he met this condition. He did say that he to the Justice Department, where he had to ask for the subsidy, basically this guarantee.
Yeah.
He said, yes, I suspect there is bankruptcy fraud. He met the first condition. The second condition is he must be willing to investigate it. And he met that condition too. He's quite happy to investigate it at an hourly rate of over 200 euros an hour. And he, as a matter of fact, he not only put a lot of time himself, but he also hired other lawyers working for the same law firm to also investigate. And by the time they were finished, they had written about 1,100 hours, which is over €250,000. To give you an idea, when the bankruptcy deficit in this company has been preliminarily set by the court to be around 330,000 euros. That includes the receiver's salary, which is over €250,000. So by far the biggest creditor is this receiver himself and his buddies who he hired as well. Another condition that must be met is that if he conducts an investigation and his suspicion of bankruptcy fraud is reinforced by this investigation, he must be willing to file a report with the prosecutor's office with his suspicion of bankruptcy fraud. And the way he did this is he contacted the Special Tax Fraud Investigators Department of the IRS, of the Dutch tax authorities, called Field. In the UK, they're called Special Branch. These people were brought in. He contacted them, and he told them of this suspicion, and they were happy to pursue it. They probably heard the taxation theft campaign as well. Yeah. Told you before, when I looked to see which organizations were looking at my website, it included the Justice Department and the Finance Department. And he had them write a draft of this report. And he just signed it. And for this one signature, he's paid 2,500 euros. Another condition he had to meet is he had to claim that that I had some assets to go after, because it's not called a subsidy, it's called a guarantee. So the idea is that it doesn't really cost the government any money, because the receiver is going to sue the former director of the bankrupt company for the bankruptcy deficit. and is going to recover the deficit from the director's personal assets.
Because they're going to try and put you into a position where you have to admit that you conducted improper business as a director, and then you can
Well, yeah, I'll get to that in a minute. But
Okay,
the
okay.
point, the idea is, it doesn't cost the government any real money, because it will eventually come out of the assets
Yeah.
of the director of the bankrupt company, and therefore it's just a guarantee. So that the receiver will not hesitate to pursue the case, because he's going to be paid regardless.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
the idea. But he had to claim that I had some assets to come after me personally. So he made that claim. So all the boxes were checked. So he was given this guarantee. So he went off like crazy, spending 1,100 hours trying to prove, trying to investigate bankruptcy fraud, and trying to and suing me to recover the bankruptcy deficit. And again, like I said before, the main creditor was he himself. The receiver himself was the main creditor in this whole thing. The second creditor was the tax authorities, and those two together, that was just about the whole thing. That was just about those were pretty much the only real creditors in this whole bankruptcy thing.
Bless you.
Well, thanks. Now, he the day that the company was declared bankrupt, he came to my office, and I said to him, all the books, the accounting is done by our bookkeeper. What he does it from home. So he has a laptop at his home. That's where he keeps the books. So that's where we have a digital accounting system. That's where it is. And I can ask him to be here tomorrow so he can give it to you. He said, no, that's not necessary. Give him his phone number. I'll get it myself. Okay. And I said, well, all the invoices and contracts and other source documents that it's based on, they're all here. And I showed him a wall filled with bookcases filled with these source documents. I said, this is it. So he called that bookkeeper and went to get his laptop, and thereby he had everything. And then a couple of days later, he changed the locks on the office so it couldn't get in anymore, and that's how he kept it. Now, I did not ask him to sign a receipt for having received these books.
Yeah.
Well, he just locked me out of the office. I mean, I didn't physically hand them over. I showed them where they were, and he locked me out. Also, the bookkeeper handed over the laptop and didn't ask him for a receipt. And then later on, he claimed that he received only a very marginal, very minimal accounts. And so my lawyer wrote him a letter saying, what are you talking about? Tell us what you're missing. If you think, I don't think you're missing anything, but if you think you're missing something, tell us what it is, so we can see where this misunderstanding originates. He never responded to it, but he has for years insisted that he was given only a minimal amount of books and accounts. And typically they're believed. It's like the police, basically. When you go to court and there's two parties, there's the police and there's a common man, and they have conflicting stories, typically the courts will believe the policeman. And that's the basis of the system. And the police they have to swear an oath that they'll tell the truth, and they believe them no matter what they say. It's basically the system. Unless there's some really hard evidence that they're lying through their teeth, Basically, they're believed. And we have a similar system with receivers. They're considered to be officers of the court. They are also attorneys at law, so they swore an oath.
Yeah, they have a flawless reputation.
So they simply believe them.
Yeah, yeah.
Which makes it very difficult to fight them. It's very tough to fight a receiver. And if you go personally bankrupt, it's even more difficult because then you have no assets with which to hire a lawyer to defend yourself. And then you can get a government-appointed lawyer, but of course he only gets a little bit of money, so he won't spend, usually won't spend as much time, and therefore you won't get as good a defense representation. Now. That's one of the things that he did. Another thing he did is he asked the judge for permission to invade my home, to find cash and to find missing books, missing accounts, missing papers. And so a couple of days after the company gone bankrupt, he showed up at my door with 2 policemen and a locksmith, and 2 lawyers working for the same firm, and a forensic accountant, to invade my home and look for cash and books. And
incredible.
Yeah. And he opened my safe, and in my safe he found something like 1,100 euros and $40 and 30 francs. And the next day, the biggest national newspaper in the Netherlands, called the Telegraaf, published a story about this. And they say, and in this they wrote that the receiver had found an administrative chaos, and they had opened my safe and found dollars, euros, and francs without specifying
$30. Incredible. How they manipulate that media, Toine. Incredible.
Yeah.
Wow.
And what he also found were a few shopping bags and boxes with prints, and said, "Aha! I have now discovered your secret books that you've tried to keep from me." And I said, "Don't be absurd. That's not how this is." So I explained to him what that was. I said, "Listen, a couple of months ago, the bookkeeper resigned, and I had to find a new one. And I found a new one, but he was an old guy, was about to retire, and he liked to work with paper. So he was given the laptop with the digital accounting on it." But what he did is he printed it all because he liked to work with paper. And after he printed it, he was going through this for a couple of weeks, sitting at our office, going through these papers. But he didn't really do what we hired him to do, which is to correct any mistakes that he might find, and to deal with I mean, there was some backlog now because, well, there was some time had passed between the resignation of the former bookkeeper and the new one.
Yeah.
So that's what we hired him to do, and he wasn't really doing it. So after a couple of weeks,
we let him go again.
Yeah, I let him go, and it was all fixed. I mean, all the mistakes were all fixed, and the backlog was fixed. But this guy had printed all this stuff, and it was still there. He left it behind, obviously, didn't take it with him. Well, what I should have done probably is to hire some professional firm to destroy it. But since the company was about to go bankrupt, I think that was a good use of the company's scarce resources. So I just took it home. So I explained this to him, which was the truth, which was obvious. But he stuck to his story. He said, "No, I don't believe you. I think I have now discovered your secret books, your or double booking system. And so that's what he wrote in this report.
And that's what got into the newspaper.
And then he filed this report with the prosecutor's office, accusing me of bankruptcy fraud.
Mm-hmm.
And he did that at the end, the very end, the late December 2010. Another thing that he did, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
is he asked the judge permission to take my passport, because there is a provision in Dutch bankruptcy law that if you go bankrupt, you're not allowed to leave your hometown without the court's permission. And there is a provision that they can take your passport if they're afraid you're going to leave and leave the country. This is a very old law from the mid-19th century,
Mm-hmm.
when in your town was a big thing. And I was not personally bankrupt, but I was a former director of a bankrupt company, so they could apply the same rules to me, and they did. So I was told by he came to my home, said, "I want your passport. Here's the judge's paper that you have to hand over your passport, and from now on, you're not allowed to leave
The municipality.
You're not allowed to leave your town without getting the court's permission."
Amazing. And you did get him to sign that he received your document this time, Toine?
Yeah, that sounds like it,
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but the harm had already been done.
So harsh. Really to bully you. You want to call taxation theft? This is the price.
Yeah, like I said, it was like a crusade. He so I asked the court. I just moved from The Hague to a suburb of The Hague,
Mm-hmm.
and so I didn't know anyone in this new town, this new suburb I just moved to. I had no business there. I had nothing there. I just moved there, so anytime I wanted to do anything, either business-wise or visiting friends or anything, I had to leave my new town, which I couldn't do unless I first got permission from the court. The first time I asked the court for permission, the court said, "Don't bother me with this, ask the receiver for permission." So now I had to ask the receiver for permission every time I wanted to leave this suburb, which was a huge pain in the neck.
And that's where all these hours come from, Toine. Now we know.
Yeah. So I asked my lawyer I said, "We need to fight this in court. This is ridiculous." And he said, no, it's not a good idea. Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay.
He recommended that not to fight this, and he's not yet. He said, "Well, we should. For now, I recommend that you just accept your fate, and maybe in a couple of months we'll fight it in court. But not now. It's not wise. It's not strategic." And I have my doubts, but in general, it's you should either take your lawyer's advice or fire him and find another lawyer, because what's the point of having a lawyer if you're not going to take his advice? And his strategy depends on you following his advice. Otherwise, his strategy is going to fail. So that's a good rule in general. I should have fired this lawyer, obviously, but I didn't. Not yet.
Mm-hmm. You still wanted to trust him.
Yeah, and but that took a whole year, and finally I pressured my lawyer into fighting this in court, and he did, and the receiver opposed it. He still wanted to. He didn't want to go give my passport back, and he still wanted me to ask his permission every time I was going to leave town. So the case went to court, and one argument that he made for this was that he was afraid that I was hiding assets somewhere abroad, and that as soon as he gave me back my passport, I would go there and hide them even better.
Retire on the beach.
So the court asked him, Mr. Receiver, you have now had a full year to discover if Mr. Manders is hiding any assets anywhere. Do you have any clue, any indication that there are some hidden assets anywhere? He said, no, I don't.
But I have a feeling, a gut feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. And what the court said, they gave me back my passport, and what they said is that according to the law, he would have had to give it back to me within 2 weeks.
Wow.
And he had wanted to keep it. He couldn't keep it. If he wanted me not to have it back, he should have asked within 2 weeks to have the passport declared void. It into the Ministry of the Interior, which he hadn't done. And the court said, because you haven't done so, you've lost your right to do so.
Wow.
So you should have.
It took you 49 weeks more than it had to.
Yeah.
Wow.
So you must give it back right away. But my lawyer, whom I fired not long after this, he didn't know about this, so he didn't use this argument in court to fight this decision. Well,
let me do one more raffle, Toine, because we are more than 20 minutes since the last one. I'm gonna pick one more winner. Let me do that. Good luck to all participants. 9 this time. Crypto Bro, it's up to you, or you won it. Crypto Bro, congratulations. Let me spin the wheel. See what Crypto Bro won. 10 EFLs with a multiplier of, let's find it. 10 EFLs with a multiplier of 1 makes 10 EFL. Alright, I'm gonna start a new raffle. I have some questions of people that I picked up during our conversation, Toine. If you want, I can ask them and maybe have that as the end of this session. I don't know how you feel. I don't know if you want to sit in the garden.
Yeah, I have some something to do, so I need to keep it.
Let me ask a couple of questions that I got from the people here. First of all, are you aware that there is a Badger wallet where you can receive money on? Maybe that is something we need to set up, Toine. I got people here asking me if I can make you accept donations in crypto coins. Maybe this week, and we can agree that you will come on the show again next week, for example, and then you're gonna have your own crypto wallet ready for people to show the QR code, and they allow them to send you some of their favorite tokens. I was also thinking about creating a Toine token, for example, where you can give people some kind of a reduced price of your services because you are still advising people on a financial level. And last question, real question I have here, what do you think about a Nexit?
Okay, well, as for question number 1, at this time, I'm personally bankrupt. So if you give me a donation, I would have to hand it right over to my receiver. But I also have 3 little children, and I also have a girlfriend who's the mother of these 3 little children, and they, of course, have also suffered tremendously under the intention I've been getting from the government. Let's put it mildly.
Yes.
So my girlfriend would be happy to. I'm sure she would be happy to accept a donation.
All right.
And
let's set up a wallet for her for next week.
Yeah. So if you donate money to my girlfriend, so she can spend it on my children, you'll make me very happy too.
Yeah. All right. That's something we're gonna fix for next week. It's I'm not gonna do this now live in the stream. It's a little bit complicated, and You need we need some time for that. So we can. I will write you an explanation in our private chat, and then when you are here next week again, we have set it up for your girlfriend. To be very clear. Um,
Good.
and then last question about Nexit. Would you like to answer that one? How do you feel about that? Should that happen, or is that something you would like to talk about in a future episode? Because again, I'm looking at
Yeah. Yeah, it's I have a very clear opinion about the European Union,
let's hear it.
but to explain it well, what I wanted to say is that to explain it well takes probably takes more time than I have right now. So what I
Can I
could
ask
do
you?
is maybe
Can I ask
give you.
you on your opinion, Twan, just so that the one who asked the question now will hear the answer, and then for next time
Yeah,
you're gonna explain it.
that's okay. Yeah. So my view of the European Union is that. Obviously, it's not perfect. Anything that politicians design is never perfect. There are pros and cons. There are costs and benefits. And I believe that until the year 1992, until the early 90s, that at the time it wasn't called the European Union, it was called the European Community, or before that, the European Economic Community. At the time, I believe that the benefits outweighed the costs. At the time, what was done under the banner of the EEC was that a lot of freedoms were increased and a lot of roadblocks were taken away. A lot of tariffs were abolished, actually completely abolished. A lot of non-tariff barriers were abolished.
For trade,
Uh,
it was really good.
yes. They even had a rule that if you're allowed to bring your product on one market in one country in the European Union, then you're allowed to put it on the market in the other countries as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, at the time, there was no single currency. There was hardly an effort to have a political union. So freedom was mostly increased. There was this idea of freedom of establishment, the free flow of goods, the free flow of capital, to a certain extent, the free flow of services. Um, the European Court of Justice, in this period of time, actually until very recently, have in general uh, ruled very favorably in favor of the taxpayer. So whenever there was a tax dispute, typically the tax dispute was that a member state was trying to levy a tax, and the taxpayer made a claim that this tax or this tax treatment was a violation of freedom of establishment or the free flow of capital. And the ECJ, the European Court of Justice, would usually find in favor of the taxpayer, the tax avoider. So a lot of libertarians are not really aware of this, or are only partially aware of this, or do not consider its significance. But I do believe that, especially in this period until the early 90s, the benefits far outweighed the costs. It has, however, changed. Since the early 90s, the European community has transformed to European Union, which has become more of a political union. The trend is now towards the harmonization of regulations. The trend is now to also try to harmonize taxes. There is now a minimum VAT rate in the European Union, which is a cartel, a tax cartel. Yeah. They are also trying to harmonize the system of corporate taxation. The Eurocrats are trying to have a minimum rate for corporate tax. The European Union has effectively forced countries like Ireland and Cyprus and other countries as well to get rid of favorable tax regimes, of tax breaks they were giving to foreign investors and to foreign business owners, foreign entrepreneurs. So that's obviously a huge downside of the European Union. It's a huge cost.
Yeah.
And if we're not very careful, if freedom fighters don't stop this trend, then I'm fearful that the trend is going to continue in this direction, the trend of harmonization of rules and regulations, which makes it hard to escape, which eliminates competition, and also the trend will be towards a tax cartel, tax harmonization. And what the Eurocrats would really like is the power to tax, like the United States federal government has.
Mm-hmm. European tax.
Yeah, a federal income tax. If you look at the history of the European Union and the United States, there are unfortunately a lot of similarities. Because when the United States first started, it was also an organization that was very small, had very little power, had no right to tax, or only very minimal right to tax. There were just 3 federal crimes at the time: treason, piracy, counterfeiting. There were 3 federal crimes, and that was it. Today there are hundreds of thousands of pages on the Federal Register filled with federal rules and regulations, and the average American commits 3 crimes a day without even realizing it. So that is unfortunately what politicians do. They don't like competition. They don't like to have to compete for taxpayers. They don't like to compete for talent and capital. They like to have a cartel, harmonize everything, and have minimum rates and centralize everything. And that's what's been happening in the United States over the past 250 years. This continuous trend to centralization, and we see the same trend in the European Union. If we're not careful, if we don't stop them, they're going to go down the same route. And that's why I'm very critical of this trend in the European Union. I'm not blind to its benefits. It has some definite benefits, but in the long run...
I'm trying my best to break it, Toine.
Sorry?
I'm trying my best to break it, to break the trend. And
Right.
get back to the simple rules like free trade, but leave out the mandatory money, for example, or the euro bonds that they're speaking of today. I mean, I really hope we don't get to that.
Yes, I agree.
Future.
So Nexit, yes, if there was a referendum, I would probably vote for Nexit. I completely understood why the British voted for Brexit. I do realize that there are a lot of disadvantages to such a move, especially in the short run. But a huge, big central government covering a huge territory is a huge threat to freedom. So that to me is more important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to thank you, Toine, for being here again.
You're
I
welcome.
also want to thank XGN Dr. Stein for following. You are number 101, my friend. ! Raffle. You have 8.5 minutes to do so, to participate. So Toine, thanks for being here once again. I hope to see you next week again, maybe. Let's hope that. I'm not sure. I think he already leave? Might be. Oh no, I still. You were so silent, Toine. I thought that the image froze, but you're still here. I'm sorry, man. So thanks for being here with us, Toine. And I think we should continue your story next week. I am enjoying it. I know the people here. I get a lot of good comments. Everybody is in love with your story. So thanks for sharing it with us, I guess. And have a nice weekend. In case you don't know, I have an 84-hour lockdown at the moment. So I'm not allowed to leave my home until Tuesday, 5 o'clock in the morning. And this is going on since Friday, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So 84 hours in my home. That's why I can go on with my stream for many hours more, but I understand that you want to enjoy outside as well a little bit. So thanks for your story once again, and let's see if if you're here again next week, and we will have you set up with a Bitcoin Cash SLP wallet.
Thank you very much.
All right, bye, Twan.
Goodbye.
Bye bye. All right, that was Twan. That was Twan, everybody. Great guy, of course. Let me finish this recording. The recording will be finished, is finished. I hope I started it correct. A highlight video will be up tonight or tomorrow or whenever it is up.